In 1527, a grand expedition left Spain with dreams of wealth and empire. 600 men aboard 5 ships, led by Governor Pánfilo de Narváez, were sent by the Spanish crown to explore and colonize the mysterious lands of La Florida. Among them was Álvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca, a nobleman, second in command, and treasurer of the venture. The goal was to find riches, claim territory, and return in glory. But this expedition would become one of the greatest tragedies and survival epics in the history of exploration. By the end of it, only 4 men would live to tell the tale. The expedition's problems began before they even reached the mainland. Storms battered the fleet crossing the Atlantic. Disease took hold in the cramped ships. Once they reached the coast near modern-day Tampa Bay, they quickly discovered that Florida was nothing like the paradise they had imagined. Swamps swallowed their carts. Mosquitoes bit through their armor. The local tribes, fiercely independent, resisted the foreign intruders with deadly precision. Communication with their ships broke down. As days stretched into weeks and weeks into months, the Spaniards found themselves hopelessly lost. Narváez made a fateful decision. The land force would march north, while the ships tried to sail along the coast and rendezvous farther west. But they never found each other again. Starving, injured, and constantly under attack, the men grew desperate. They wandered through the wild interior, suffering from dysentery, snake bites, and exhaustion. Many were killed by ambushes. Others simply vanished into the wilderness. By the time the survivors reached the Gulf Coast again, their numbers had dropped to just over 200. With no ships in sight, the desperate men resorted to the unthinkable. Using limited tools and salvaged materials, they built 5 crude rafts from their weapons, clothing, and melted-down armor. With these fragile vessels, they attempted to sail west along the Gulf of Mexico in hopes of reaching Spanish settlements in New Spain, modern-day Mexico. But the Gulf was merciless. Storms blew them off course. Salt water poisoned them. Hunger hollowed them out. One by one, the rafts disappeared. Cabeza de Vaca's raft, carrying about 80 men, was eventually swept ashore near Galveston Island on the Texas coast. This was the final blow. Cold, starving, and barely alive, they staggered onto land. Of those 80, only 15 would survive the first few weeks. The native Karankawa people discovered them. Initially curious, they offered food, but once supplies dwindled, relations turned hostile. The Spaniards, conquistadors turned beggars, were enslaved. For nearly 6 years, Cabeza de Vaca and the few remaining survivors lived among various indigenous tribes. At first, he was treated as a slave, forced to carry water, gather firewood, and dig roots. Many of his companions died from exposure or were killed. The dream of conquest was long gone. Survival became the only goal. But Cabeza de Vaca did something few Europeans of the time ever did. He adapted. He learned the languages and customs of the tribes. He observed their rituals and medicine. Over time, his role changed from slave to traveler, then from traveler to healer. The tribes began to see him and his companions as holy men. He used a blend of Christian prayers and indigenous practices to treat the sick. And whether by faith or coincidence, some recovered. His reputation grew. Among his closest companions was Estebanico, a black North African slave who became a crucial part of the group. Estebanico learned local dialects, served as an interpreter, and often acted as a scout. His charisma and adaptability made him vital to their survival. Along with Andres Dorantes and Alonso del Castillo, the 4 survivors became known as mystical wanderers, respected and even revered by many of the tribes they encountered. They traveled on foot, moving westward and southward across Texas into what is now New Mexico and northern Mexico. They endured unimaginable hardships, frostbite in winter, near starvation in desert crossings, and the constant risk of violence from unfamiliar tribes. But their reputation often preceded them. Tribes would welcome them, hoping for healing and blessings. Sometimes entire villages followed them for days. After nearly 8 years of wandering, in the spring of 1536, the 4 men encountered a group of Spanish slave traders near the Sinaloa River in western Mexico. The encounter was jarring. The Spaniards were shocked to see 4 ragged, animal skin-clad men claiming to be survivors of a royal expedition. Cabeza de Vaca and his companions, who had not seen a fellow European in years, were equally stunned. When they reached Mexico City, the tale of their survival sent ripples through the Spanish Empire. But not everyone celebrated their return. Cabeza de Vaca's account, which he later published as La Relación, wasn't just a chronicle of survival. It was a rebuke. He condemned the brutality of Spanish colonial practices and the inhumanity of enslaving indigenous people. He described the Native Americans not as savages, but as complex, spiritual, and often generous people. His words were radical for the time. Cabeza de Vaca returned to Spain and later became governor of the Rio de la Plata region in South America. But his progressive views and attempts to implement fair treatment of natives earned him political enemies. He was arrested, tried, and sent back to Spain in disgrace. His later life faded into obscurity, but his account remained, a powerful and rare European perspective that challenged the conquest narrative. What makes Cabeza de Vaca's story so extraordinary isn't just that he survived. It's how he survived. By surrendering the sword and embracing humility, by learning instead of conquering, he endured. His journey spanned over 5,000 miles across rivers, mountains, deserts, and cultural divides. It was a survival not just of body but of soul, a transformation from conquistador to wanderer, from invader to witness. Centuries later, his journey remains one of the most powerful and overlooked stories of the age of exploration. Not just a tale of endurance, but a rare glimmer of understanding in a time of conquest and cruelty. Álvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca ventured into the unknown in search of gold, but what he found instead was something far more valuable: empathy, survival, and the humanity that can bloom even in the harshest wilderness.